And we're back in our beautiful Hamburg studio. Let's continue with our next session. We're going to have actually a very interesting panel on rewards and monetization. Let's welcome our speakers and the moderator of this session, Peggy Enzels, the lead analyst and founder at MobileGroove. Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, doing great.
Fantastic. So good to see you here today in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us. I understand you're all from different places physically right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm based in Germany. Where's everyone else? Mark?
I'm over in London.
Okay.
Nice.
Jane?
I'm based in beautiful Hamburg.
Oh, you are in Hamburg.
So yeah.
Seriously. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being so international and flying over to our virtual studio today. We're very excited to listen to your panel and all yours.
Thank you very much, Elena. And yes, we are excited because, hey, rewarded ads is not just a best performing ad format, one of the best performing. It is also shaping the future of mobile games monetization. So we're going to talk about what are rewarded ads, what are some do's and don'ts, when do you reward, when do you maybe worry about cannibalizing or possibly annoying your whales? Lots of great questions. We're going to get a crash course in what you need to know from publishers and providers who did it and who are going to share it today with us. So let me get to our panel. I will take it sort of in order of what I'm seeing on my screen. So we've got Mark Bierman. He is head of BizDev EMEA at MoPub. We have Tobias Adel, head of new business relations at Whow Games. And finally, Jane Anderson, head of advertising SDK monetization at Gameloft. So panel, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to get right down to it, starting with just you, Tobias and Jane. You know, rewarded ads, very hot topic, but we want to understand some context here. So you're both at games publishers. How are you using rewarded ad campaigns to monetize your players? Is it working for you just in high level view? I'll start with you, Jane. What are you doing with rewarded ads over at Gameloft?
We have rewarded ads in almost all of our games. I would say in 99% of our games. And we use them for both hardcore games as an alternative payment method, let's say, as a secondary after IIP. It's also the main source of revenue for some of the games, for more casual games. So very widely and very happily using rewarded ads.
Interesting. So, I mean, I just wrote about that recently, not recently, but sort of at the start of the year for Forbes. I wrote an article about this being the next big thing. When did you start with rewarded ads?
Probably somewhere 4 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah, and we keep scaling.
Okay.
So we've been doing it for quite some time.
You are a veteran. You are seasoned. Tobias, what about your effort and what you've been doing in rewarded ads? Sort of, you know, where do you use them and what have you been seeing?
Yeah, for us, it's not the main channel, it's an additional revenue channel. But for us, we see a chance there to monetize our non-payers and even convert them into paying players so that you got the experience, how to use the in-game currency at your product, and how to scale this up, even for payers. So this needs to be in a good scale. And we make quite good experience there. So.
Okay, so that's what you're doing with it. So we have the context, the audience knows, they are listening to people who have been doing this for a while. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, just go back a little bit further and talk about how marketers should approach rewarded ads. You've been doing it, maybe even starting with the entry points to monetization, because you have to design at the end of the day a flow that feels natural, feels organic. I'll stay with you, Tobias, for a moment, because you are sold on the benefits of rewarded video, but you've also had to do a lot of work on your game to make it part of the flow. Can you share that?
For sure. So the best is if you start to produce a game directly in the beginning to think how you want to monetize your users. And this is the best way. Like, okay, do I want to focus on in-app purchase? Do I want to focus on rewarded ads, or want to be both? So it needs to be a a good user flow, that it's not interrupting the game itself. So you really need to think where to place this. And as Jane mentioned, so put it there that it can be used as an in-game currency, that the user really get this. And on a certain point, you also need to decide, okay, how many ads I will show, and that you do not destroy your ecosystem. So at the end, it's, well, at the beginning, you have to think about your KPIs and that everything is filled.
We're going to get to those KPIs in a moment, but I do remember on our short prep call that you also said that you had to, you did it late, which is not a sin, but you did have to redesign the game to make it part of the flow. What did you do and what did you learn?
Actually, we A/B test. So where we integrated and also with the users, and then we find the right spots for us. And but at the end, it's an ongoing A/B test. So
okay. I think I recall you, Jane, saying the testing never stops. What is the one basic thing that you believe marketers need to get right to get that value exchange right? Because it's the flow and it's also the reward. What can you share?
Well, I agree with Tobias that in the beginning, when you're producing a game, you have to think about the monetization. And if you're thinking of the game that is going to be ad driven, you have to think about the ad integration and rewarded video integration, probably from the moment when the meta is shaped. For the future, when you already released and you're thinking about how to improve your rewarded video monetization, you have to, first of all, check the market and see what is happening in the genre. And there is nothing shameful in copying some of the techniques that are already working. You need to get some of the metrics from the market and indeed A/B test. It's a never-ending A/B test process for you not to cannibalize the IAP and for you to get to that sweet spot when your LTV is maximized, basically.
You bring up some interesting points about metrics. I was going to leave you out there, Mark, a little bit longer to drink your tea or coffee, but I'm going to let you chime in here because we're talking about what you need to get right. What do marketers need to get right for this value exchange? And of course, at MoPub, that's what you're dealing with, with your client, with your customers, and they're using you as an ad partner. So they're also, they're seeing you as a partner in this process. Share a little bit about what you bring to the table in these discussions when it's about getting it right or hitting the right metrics. We'll go a little deeper later, but I wanted you to chime in here as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think Jane and Tobias have covered some of the practicalities, right? So when developers are looking at integrating rewarded video into their projects, it's obviously easier to start integrating them when you're actually building a project, because immediately it's going to be quite a native part of what they're doing. And at MoPub, we've worked with a lot of partners in the early stages of development, really make rewarded video part of that core loop. But, the reality is a lot of developers are adding this revenue stream to diversify, where their revenue is coming from as a complement to existing IAP revenue. So I think the testing really is an important part. But I'd say additional to that is you need to sit down and look at your game and try to understand the different types of player style within your ecosystem and think about what kind of rewards might entice those different player cohorts. And then I think, as both Jane and Tobias said, at that point, it's really just about testing and finding that sweet spot for you. The end state isn't to find the perfect and leave it. It's always going to be a continual test and evolution. So that pretty aligns with how we work at MoPub. We don't consider that the optimization's ever done. It's just moving on to the next, where does that next 5% come from?
And that's probably the hardest part, to get to a certain point and then get that next 5%. You did bring up an interesting point, and this comes in with the chief challenges because you're talking about player types, understanding your audience in your game. And that's the ongoing challenge here, right? Is doing it properly, doing it so that you show the right ad to the right audience, not just because it has to be relevant and valuable, but because you're monetizing this audience. Tobias, let's go with you, or Tobias, if I'm saying it properly. I'm based along in Germany. I just have to automatically go to Tobias. But starting with you, you have made the extra effort not to show ads in your game, for example, that are similar to other game ads. But that's just one thing that you've done. Tell me a little bit about how you are making certain the ads fit the audience and also make you money at the end of the day.
At the end, it's important that you find the right partner, for example, MoPub or the others which are out there, and that you really can work with your partner and can say, okay, this one or these kind of ads are approved at my platform, that you do not cannibalize your audience inside your product with similar products. So this is quite important. On the other hand, it's some kind of manual work that you for sure control this, and you block the shady ones for you that you don't want at your product. This is also some kind of time consuming. And at the end, it's also there some kind of A/B testing, and that you find the right way. And then if you compare the numbers and also see what's the value for your paying players, your non-paying players, from whale to dolphin, that you really got the best out of it from users, for you as a product owner.
So I have to ask you, I mean, you give us the blueprint, but I want to understand how you also achieve the outcome. So maybe Mark, you also weigh in here a bit, because, you know, it's all those aquatic animals, but you basically don't want to, I was going to say piss off, but they don't upset your whales is what I want to say. Didn't want to say that, but you do want to not annoy them. But at the same time, you know, there are some myths around what the dolphins will stand for, or why you shouldn't maybe go for the minnows, because they might look small on paper or in your spreadsheet, but they can also monetize quite well. Can you give me some I wouldn't say rule of thumb, but you can maybe share how you approach this array of creatures as we look to monetize the best and leave the rest?
What I can also share is that for sure you need to compare this with the channels where you get the users from. So how much you pay for the user cost for the acquisition, and then you can put it in a balance of, okay, how much money I will make with the users, how much I spend with the users, are these organic users? But this is something that you really need to find on your own. So there's no clear rule that I can give. So it's something that you really have to explore on your product, and something that you really need to explore over, and I say not month, it will be ongoing over years. So as the times are changed. So we saw, especially with COVID, that the users interact different with the product, and also with the different ways how we monetize the users. So and this is super important now. Hopefully COVID ends. This will be a new challenge for us, as we need to rethink how we change things again on our product.
I can't resist asking, I mean, what was the impact of COVID, or what kind of shift is this? Because I know that games exploded because we were in lockdown, but I've also read and seen, and maybe you've seen it, rewarded video, therefore also exploding, because it's great to get something when you don't have to worry about paying for it. You're paying for it with your attention. Is that what you're talking about, this explosion, and how do we maintain the momentum?
Yeah, so it's really the way that we saw that in the first step, the user acquisition cost went down, and then we had some kind of more. In the first step, no, there were not more videos available, but then after a lot of more companies adding the money again back to the market, more and more videos popped up, and then there was again some kind of different channel. And you really have to think how many videos I will allow my user to watch, do not destroy my economy. And even if the users are more active on the platform, then you have to rethink. If you, for example, have a gap of 3 videos per day, but in the average, the user spend an hour on your platform. But with COVID, then you got 3 hours they spend on the platform or inside the game, for example. And then you need to rethink, okay, will I allow them more videos, like 5 or at least 10? I don't know. Yeah. So actually, I know, but I will not share what we do.
I was going to do a follow-up quickly. Okay.
Yeah,
I respect that. That's good. Jane, one other challenge, and that you've been really focused on, because it's how to make sure you're not losing in-app purchases and payers rather in the process. Can you give us an example of what you've been doing at Gameloft? Because I have to say, you have turned this into quite a science. We had a discussion the other day where you had your whole new waterfall model for us already. We might not go into that, but there is an approach that I think we can learn a lot from here.
Well, basically, we have different games from different genres, and the approach for each of the products that we have is super different. The beginning is like you have to integrate the rewarded videos in the way that you see that it's bringing additional value, that it's not zeroing up and you're not eating from the IP, meaning that your whales didn't stop spending because they're getting some currencies, some resources from the rewarded video ads. At the same time, you have to sort of balance it out, because the whales and the dolphins are your most active players, and they're gonna say that we don't have enough of the rewarded video ads, and the complaints will never stop coming, let's say. So in this case, you have to segment, and it's the topic that has been already discussed. You have to segment by whales and dolphins and non-paying users, and the strategy for the ad monetization is going to be different. In some cases, you may want to show only cross promotion, or probably only cross promo to some highly valuable users because of the churn probability. But there is no golden rule, and I do not recommend segmenting users from the scratch. Like, if it works for you without segmentations, then show the same rewarded ads, the same amount of rewarded ads for all the users. Because as a rule of thumb, I'd say for casual or mid-core game, that would be the normal strategy. If your game is more hardcore, if you have 1% of users that are making 99.5% of your cash in the end of the month, then you have to think smart and be careful and show ads or increase the frequency of the ads to non-payers only. But again, it's don't trust your gut feeling, and trust only numbers, and do not make any decisions before you run any sort of testing. And we saw it a lot with different game teams as well. The game is being released, and the automatic response of the product owners is that we want all the competitors out of our ad monetization. Normally, it's going to mean that you're not going to have any money from the ad monetization, because it's two sides of the same coin. You don't show competitors, you don't get money. So you have to be really careful with that, and basically test.
So Mark, you've heard what I've got here in the way of best practice from Jane and from Tobias, but I'd like you to give a view from your vantage point, because you're working with so many publishers. I could say give them a scorecard, or are they right? I won't be that blatant and blunt here, but is it on the mark? Is it what you're hearing? Or can you add something to the conversation around a must-do or a no-go that maybe they have skipped over, but you have seen in your work?
Yeah, I'd say I don't disagree with either of them. I think the key thing is there's always going to be some differences depending on the product itself, the genre. But the thing that does echo with me is the idea you're exposing your player base or your users to a new revenue stream and something that you don't directly control. So when you introduce that, naturally you need to introduce it at a level of exposure that's okay from you from a comfort level perspective. So to Tobias's point, maybe to start with, you're blocking competitors, or maybe to Jane's point, you're only showing ads to non-paying customers because that's sort of your initial hypothesis. The way we typically work with partners that are opening up rewarded to existing ecosystems is definitely start off on a relatively controlled group of users, start off small, a percentage of the player base, a limited number of rewards, a certain frequency cap with them, maybe blocking competitors. Because as Jane says, maybe if you block competitors, you're not going to make the maximum money. And if you only show one ad a day, you're leaving money on the table as well. But you need to start from a safe place and work outwards. And, somewhere in the middle, you should find the sweet spot for you. because ultimately if you're looking at mid-core games, maybe 90% of the revenue, 95% of the revenue is coming from IAP. So although you won't get maximum ad revenue by blocking your competitors, you are protecting the IAP revenue, that these users, because they can't access your paying customers any other way than through your ecosystem. So I think, to summarize, there is no right or wrong, but I do agree that it's best to start off more conservative, because you can always open the tap later, rather than sort of working like opening the hose and then realizing that you haven't got the balance quite right and needing to work backwards and find what's causing the problem.
That's when we're talking about sort of a closed games ecosystem, if you will. It's about, what games do I show? Competitor games, yes, no. But the big opportunity that a lot of people are getting very excited about is the brand opportunity. And they're getting very excited about the opportunity because they want to be in an environment where it's part of the flow. This is an entertainment environment. It's fun. It's great for brands to be part of that. I'll stick with you for a moment, Mark, because how should marketers be thinking about brands? What kind of environment, what kind of inventory can they be providing that brands will value most? Keeping in mind, of course, that brands are also eager to enhance their data. And this is a post-identifier world. So it's probably a great, even a better match than it was before.
Yeah, I think definitely, especially with lockdown, we saw a lot of appetite from brands, especially for rewarded video and gaming, as they look for new sources to engage with people in a less physically interactive world. So naturally, people are spending more time on mobile. It became a more relevant place to meet those users. So I'd say the best advice for marketers and game developers is, there's the fundamental stuff. So creating an environment that's safe for brands. So you think about kind of user-generated content, that the content's sort of generally appropriate, that the audience is interacting in a safe and pleasant way. And that's kind of, most developers are looking to make high-quality games. So I consider that a prerequisite. I think the second thing is thinking about ad placement from a viewability perspective. As we know, brands are looking for eyeballs, they're looking for reach. So it's important that the ads are placed where users are seeing them, to encourage engagement, and not just lots of banners spamming through an app, just to create as many impressions as possible. It's about quality engagement. But I think the most important thing in the context of rewarded video is trying to appeal to as many unique users as possible. So designing your placement so that you're actually looking at not just about giving away free stuff, but looking at the different friction points within your game. And thinking about how rewarded video can get a user past those. So, if they run out of lives, that's going to be the end of the session. But creating a contextual reward that gives them the ability to continue for a period of time entices one set of users, whereas a daily double, might encourage someone else. So by maximizing the, unique exposure of ads, it really maximizes the chances of a brand finding a certain audience within that ecosystem that makes sense.
So Jane, what's really interesting, and I did look into this when Gameloft did it, right, is you are really grasping this opportunity with both hands. You have a division at Gameloft to sell inventory directly to brands. Very, very smart. I'd like you to share one thing you're doing or seeing has worked that allows you to maximize returns, not just for yourself, but also for the brands.
Well, I think that I'm going to agree totally with all that Mark said, because brands care most about the reach and about the viewability. So when we're talking about rewarded video, I think that it's in general a very clean ad format, because there's no misclick there. It's a user initiated video. But if we're talking about interstitials and banners, of course, frequency matters for you not to spam users every 10 seconds with an ad, because, this is going to drop the performance in general. And
but you still have to get a lot of unique. So how do you balance that?
Exactly, but it's different. Like having a lot of unique users is not the same as having a lot of impressions. So it's better to show, let's say, one impression per each user than half of your users are going to see 2 impressions from the brand perspective, and actually from the revenue perspective as well, because it's going to drop the performance and you're going to have lower CPMs, whether from brands or from CPI campaigns that you're running. So yeah, from the integration part, you just have to produce a clean game with a nice content and integrate your ads, let's say, decently. From the partners side of you, you have to find the networks that work best for you. Networks now have a decent chunk of brand demand. Like, you don't have to go the hard way like Gameloft did. You don't have to invest a lot in this division. You can get brand demand from various demand sources.
Mm-hmm. So Tobias, I didn't ask you if you're doing a lot with brands currently, are you?
Actually, we have some advertisers on our platform.
Okay.
And which are, let's call them brands. Yes. But the thing is, I always like to compare this in a harmonized way, like in the old world of TV spots, and I fully agree with Jane that you're not spamming your users. So the thing is, if you have some kind of high quality products, it's more like an advertisement. And I always like to compare this with this old batch on products as seen on TV, so that you really also get a benefit out of it for your product, that you have some kind of high quality ads with your high quality product, and then it's some kind of quality advertisement at the end.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone out there, all the attendees, of course, you can ask questions and we welcome them. We're getting near to the end. I want to end with the thing people are probably waiting for most, which is measuring success, and to get you all to give your view on, what to aim for, the KPIs. It depends. It always depends. But there are some things we want to focus on, that we must focus on. Mark, I'd start with you because you advise, of course, games marketers. We talked about the uniques, videos per day. We didn't talk about playables versus video. So why don't we just look at that for a moment, the format that works, and then a golden rule of engagement you can share. So we'll start with the format.
Yeah, sure. So I think in the context of rewarded, because you hear we talk about rewarded video,
yes,
which is kind of a misnaming at this point, I guess, is that you have this rewarded interaction. So it's a full screen ad, essentially. That can be a video, as it often is, but a lot of performance marketers find success, and we know this from obviously we own CrossInstall, which is a big player in this space. Playables. So playable ads are obviously typically HTML5, rich media interactive experiences. So rather than that 30 seconds being quite passive where a user watches the video, they can actually have what is essentially a mini demo or trial of playing the game. So at least from MoPub's perspective, we actually think the interplay and the mix of all of those different format options is optimal for success, because not every user is the same. And also not every advertiser sees the same success with the same formats. So we think you should be pretty open to showing videos and playables, which is pretty common these days. But yeah, I think to give you my, sort of golden rule of success, or the thing we often think about focusing on first, is obviously the number one thing you can do to maximize your revenue is maximizing the percentage of unique users that are engaging with at least one rewarded video a day. So to come back to what I mentioned earlier, that probably means you don't just have one implementation of a rewarded video. You'd probably have as a minimum maybe 3, 3 to 5 as, let's say, an optimized range, but you're going to be testing a lot more than that. The starting point for a good rewarded video implementation is 30% of unique users engaging with at least one ad a day. But, I've seen companies take that as high as 80, 90% for the more casual end of the spectrum. So there really is a big bracket there, but above 30%, you're going in the right direction. And then I think to Jane's point is, once you've got that percentage maximized as much as possible, you can sequentially open up that frequency cap until you find the point where an additional impression isn't really driving you additional revenue, or is actually degrading revenue to some degree. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think that's something that really says it straight out. Jane, is he right? Share your thinking about the KPIs that matter when you're optimizing the user experience and also trying to increase what you are able to achieve, monetization as well as engagement rate?
The engagement rate is very important, and indeed it's going to be probably the first metric to start with, because it's going to show that the rewards are the rewarded videos are visible to users. Then you have to work on the ads per daily active users to see if the rewards are needed to your users. So you have to make sure that rewards are both visible and needed, and that they're not cannibalizing on the IP. The only little thing that I'm going to add to what Mark said already is that one of the key takeaways that the publishers can get for the metrics, for the KPIs, is to talk to people like Mark, to talk to their account managers from the ad networks, to talk to account managers from the mediation platforms, because these guys, they see all the market, and they understand what is the good KPI for your genre and what is not, where you can work harder and you can get more revenue. So don't hesitate to talk to the industry, basically.
Okay, and that's why we're talking to him. We've got Mark here. Tobias, aside from talking to Mark, what else would you offer as some advice, KPIs that you measure or think that inform your strategy best, because it's about multiplying that value?
Yeah, already a lot of things already mentioned. And what I can only add is like, trust your own numbers. The thing is that if there's some kind of, this is the market average, this is something, the number I need to reach. So the thing is, it really depends on your product, the genre where you're in, and you need to find your own numbers. And you really need to compare then, beside the retention, also the average revenue per paying user, the revenue you receive from the ads, then you have to fill up the bucket and do your math and your analytics. So this is super important. At the end, it's your KPIs, and you need to decide on your own for your product what kind of point you want to reach. And the thing is, there is some kind of market average out there, but I always recommend, like, get your own targets as a developer and reach them and see then the next step and look for the user base, even for different markets. So the thing is, you can't say, okay, this is my average that I want to reach worldwide. So we have to look at every certain market. And then on the other hand, it's an ongoing process again. So never stop, do your analytical part, and look continuously on your numbers and do A/B testing.
Okay. And I see that we're almost at time. I'll just ask Elena one more time if we have any questions that we need to be asking here. Elena, what's the situation with questions? Or can we go to wrap up?
Thank you very much, guys. Actually, we're running out of time, sadly.
Okay.
But dear audience, if you have more questions, I was just going to say,
it flies by, but we just scratched the surface. But no, that's what I thought. I did see some questions at the end, but now we don't really have the time to take them. But we think we're going to be sticking around here for more. Is that correct? What's the next step?
The next step is please join the chat, the Q&A chat by the stream window. And dear audience, please feel free to ask any questions you have left so far. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. It was very interesting and thorough panel. And thank you for the KPIs and ideas, something that we need to think about. I'm sure lots of us do. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day and good luck.
Thank you, Elena, for having us. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
And Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.